What I hope to do is to cover every single Need for Speed game from Underground onwards, including ports and not including mobile ports or any game that came before Underground because, to be honest, I don't have anything particularly interesting to say about them. Okay, listen, look. I get it. When I look on unwashedcocks.com and see a post with 1.2k upvotes calling me out, I will admit my fuck up. Look, what I said in the Underground video still holds true. I don't think I have anything particularly interesting or funny to say about the games that came before Underground, at least for each game to get their own individual video. But because I know Reddit is going to get salty at me when they're not posting about having the same amount of color of Skittles after sorting them and eating the extras, this is the only interesting thing I could find on the front page, and it's literally from art not interesting. How the fuck do you use this website? I figured that maybe I should take a look at the older games. So what I'm gonna do is take a look at the Need for Speed 2, Hot Pursuit, High Stakes, Porsche Unleashed, Hot Pursuit 2, and some of their accompanying ports, either in separate videos or in 1 or 2 compilation videos at the end of the retrospective. Why am I giving into the cesspool that is Reddit, of all things? Well, the dirty incels have a point. It's not a retrospective unless I cover the whole series, and honestly, thinking about it, I don't think I'll be satisfied unless I cover everything. Still not gonna do the MMOs and mobile games though, I literally cannot be fucked. Also, I do not actually mean the things I said about Reddit users. I'm sure you're all lovely people, and I'm sure your mum buys you plenty of deodorant while you're still living with her. It sounds a bit strange in retrospect to start your game off with a version of Riders on the Storm by the Doors that replaces the original's quiet, psychedelic rock vibe with Snoop Dogg rapping verses over some chill, lo-fi hip-hop beats to relax/study to, but god damn does it work. It's the perfect setup to the game, ushering in a sequel that's a little more subdued in tone. If Underground's Get Low was the bombastic anime opening, Need for Speed Underground 2's Riders on the Storm is the reflective and somber ending. But while the shift in tone is a little less loud and in your ears, what Underground 2 brings to the table certainly isn't. This is a sequel. More cars, way more tracks, way more parts, and what would prove to be the crowning jewel, the game is open world. That doesn't sound impressive in an era where the onslaught of Ubisoft open world titles is starting to grow tiresome, but for a Need for Speed game back in 2004, mind-blowing, revolutionary, need it, want it, gotta have it. Also, before we start, some of the footage in this video is gonna look wildly different, because I did a couple of playthroughs on different platforms. The first was the Xbox version played on an Xbox 360. Not only does it run at less frames per second than the amount of times I left the house in 2019, but it also emits a horrible popping or cracking noise constantly. This is likely an emulation issue on the Xbox 360, Wrath of Cortex and Metal Arms also had issues when I played them like this, so I advise you not to play Underground 2 on the Xbox 360. The second and third playthroughs were of the PC version with a widescreen hack. It looked real nice and ran buttery smooth for the most part, except for the consistent and unexpected crashes I kept getting. To fix the crashing, I had to go to the Details tab of Task Manager and set the game to only run off one core, as well as setting it to high priority every single time I started the game. It ran almost perfectly, with a few stutters here and there, nothing too annoying, but Shadowplay did not like this one bit and kinda fucked up the footage. So some PC gameplay you see will be smooth, while the rest of it will be a little jittery. I apologize, but I really don't feel like playing through the game a fourth time. After the events of the first Underground, the player character enjoys an elongated stay at the top of the street racing scene, until suddenly a plot device in the guise of a Hummer rams into you and wrecks your car. Fed up with the way you're being treated, you tell everyone to go fuck themselves and immediately jump onto a plane to Bayview for a holiday, only to realize that you've been roped into a street racing battle royale and only the winner gets to leave Bayview. Okay, obviously that's not the plot, this isn't Carbon, but does it really matter? It's an excuse plot to get you to a new city and racing in stock Corollas. The cutscenes are presented in a comic book style, I guess because actual cutscenes in a racing game seem kind of pointless in hindsight and a waste of the budget. And there's a twist about how this dude, Caleb, was not only the one who totaled your car back in Olympic City, but has also been trying to sabotage your sponsorship deals or something. And his girl Nikki leaves him and joins you despite the fact that this has literally zero impact on the story. Genuinely, who gives a poop? Do yourself a favor and just skip all the cutscenes, unless you're really invested in watching a scene where a dude opens a gate and some PNGs of cars zoom past. They're not even so bad they're funny territory like some of the first Underground's cutscenes, they're just, haha, at least you tried, I guess. Actually, I'm not even sure they tried.
Oh, that was amazing!
Awesome racing! I can't believe it!
It's over for him! Over!
Yes!
Anyway, let's talk about the important part. Everything else. The first thing I noticed upon getting into the game, apart from the egregious product placement, is this. Listen to that 350Z roar, sounding as if its ferocity is reverberating throughout the entire city, shaking the very ground underneath its wheels. It sounds fucking amazing, and it's a massive contrast to the engine sounds of the first Underground, which sound less like actual cars and more like, I don't know, bees? I like them in a nostalgic kind of way, but man, they were kind of awful now that I think about it.
Here she comes! Speak, you fool!
The engine sounds on offer here, however, hold up especially well today, and even more so compared to, for example, whatever appliances Polyphony recorded for the engine noises in Gran Turismo 4 at the time. After a brief jaunt around Bayview in your borrowed Nissan, whatever, you get politely nudged towards a car lot and forced to choose a car. Okay, so, genuinely did not know this until recently, but the PAL and NTSC versions of the game actually have a slightly different lineup of cars. I only noticed this because I played the PAL version on Xbox and the NTSC version on PC, and was surprised to see a Honda Civic waiting for me on the PC version. An Acura RSX also becomes available later on in the game, meanwhile the Vauxhall Corsa and Peugeot 106 are completely absent. Look, I don't mind not having the 106, literally no one except my Dutch kindergarten teacher drove one of those little baby cars. But no Corsa? The little beep beep cheap Barina my nan used to drive? For shame.
Troviamo un albergo.
Troviamo un albergo.
Ah sì, super freaky.
God, finally, an imported European hatchback that helps me attract handsome foreign anime men. Exactly what I've always wanted in a car. Speaking of cars, which I didn't really talk about in the first video and definitely should have, most of them make a return from the first Underground. All the big names are here, the ever-popular Supra, R34 Skyline, Impreza, 350Z, RX-7, VW Golf, the lamest car in existence, amongst a bunch of new faces, some of which are expected and others being a nice surprise. The Corolla was a shoo-in and fits in very well to the point where it's pretty much the car that literally everyone picks as their first. We also get more representation from countries other than Japan. The Audi TT and A3 make an appearance, as well as the Holden Commodore, Pontiac GTO and Ford Mustang, as well as the underrated Mitsubishi 3000 GT, which was a nice surprise. What wasn't a nice surprise was seeing 3 slots wasted by the Lincoln Navigator, Cadillac Escalade and Hummer H2. They look god-awful when you slap parts on them, they handle like toss, and just to add insult to injury for filling a precious garage slot with one of these heaping piles of crap, they can only competitively race against each other in specially sanctioned SUV events, which do not count towards career progression. The fuck is the point of adding a literal soccer mom car to the game if there's actually no point to ever buying it? Okay, so slight correction here, you can use SUVs in regular events and still progress the game, and the AI will also be driving SUVs to even the playing field, but my point still stands that they're just not particularly fun to drive and the customization options available do not suit these cars at all. Is the novelty of installing spinners and neons on a Hummer worth it? This reviewer says, no. Underground 1 was a strict and linear affair, so the best way Underground 2 could improve on the formula was to, not do that. It was inevitable that Black Box would give an open world racer a go, considering the popularity of games such as Grand Theft Auto and The Simpsons Hit and Run, or even Midnight Club within the same genre of high-octane arcade races, but they pulled it off marvelously. Bayview is a fully explorable city with 250 miles of open road according to the back of the box, but where Underground 2 also improves over its predecessor is how varied Bayview is as a location. The city centre is filled with narrow streets, tight turns and sprawling highways. The northern outskirts are a long interconnected series of windy hairpins and S-bends that wouldn't be dissimilar to a good old-fashioned toge, and the Cole Harbour area to the south is an industrial maze filled with hidden passageways. Each section of the map feels distinct enough to be different while also still feeling like it's part of the same city, and there's a sense of scale that the devs managed to convey despite the fact that Bayview isn't actually the biggest map around. It's a little small, and with the right amount of skill, reflexes, and hopeful luck that you don't ram headfirst into oncoming traffic, you can travel from one end of the map to the other in a meager few minutes. But this is anything but a detriment. Big maps are great because it means that for the most part, everywhere you go is a new adventure. But I also treasure games with smaller maps that let you grow accustomed to their layout, learn the locations of landmarks and such so you can navigate them on your own. The city is so thoughtfully laid out for the most part that it's a joy to drive from the very moment you arrive right through to the final race. I'm absolutely hopeless at navigating open worlds without the use of waypoints or a GPS system. Fuck, I get lost in my own town sometimes, and I've been living here for 25 years. But Underground 2 has such a well-designed and memorable map that I travel to almost every event or shop without engaging the finicky GPS system, partially because of said finickiness, and partially because I wanted a reason to flex on y'all. Bayview has a reason for existing as an open world, unlike, say, Jak 2's Haven City. And I know this is the second review in a row where I'm using Jak 2 as an example, but that game's open world was nothing more than padding. It could have been removed entirely and nothing of value would have been lost. In Underground 2, not only do you get to explore Bayview and find extra money, hidden shops and races, but you also learn the layout of the city as you explore it. There's very little on-the-spot track memorization like there would be in a regular arcade racer, because the tracks take place on the streets and highways you've been getting acquainted with beforehand, and I think that's what makes open world races so engrossing. It also means that 90% of the circuits and sprints you race on are unique layouts every time, which helps to quell feelings of repetition for the most part. That's not to say that those feelings don't make themselves known from time to time. Underground 2's open world design is not perfect. I wouldn't expect it to be considering it was Black Box's first attempt, but it does stumble here and there. The game has no fast travel whatsoever, and while the small map makes travelling from event to event relatively short, it can feel pretty stop and start at times. Customizing your vehicle can also be a tedious affair, considering each type of part, body, paint, accessory and performance, is split up into its own individual shop, meaning you've got to apply your paint and vinyls at one shop, then go to another shop to install neons and window tint, only for you to change your mind on the paint and have to drive back to the shop you were just at, never mind the fact that you still don't have spoilers and rims and whatnot installed, so it's a whole fucking journey just to get to the body shop now. A whole goddamn pilgrimage just to get some fucking wheels. Even something as simple as being able to fast travel back to your garage would have been handy. You can go to your garage at any point in time, but once you exit, you get thrown back to wherever you last were. Thankfully, the track design itself is still plenty enjoyable. Probably some of the best in the series in my opinion. It might lack some of the momentary thrills found in huge jumps and tight risky shortcuts, but you've got a bit of everything here. From short sprints to high-speed highway battles to daring 3-minute long loops. Yes, some of these events can get pretty beefy. Luckily, for those longer races, the game has a pretty decent soundtrack to keep you company. It's relatively varied, despite only having 27 songs total. There's a good variety of hip-hop, electronic, rock, punk and metal, some of which, such as In My Head from Queens of the Stone Age, is perfect for cruising the streets to, while others, like the offerings from Helmet, Rise Against, Ministry and Not Mudvayne, are the perfect accompaniment to an intense dash for the finish line. One wonders why the menu only allows you to set music to play either when in the menu or driving, instead of further splitting driving into racing and cruising, because some songs aren't as suited to racing compared to others, such as the aforementioned In My Head, but that's a minor quibble of mine and doesn't really affect how good the soundtrack is. Take a listen. Okay, I bet you're wondering how that one really cool song you've probably seen someone play on Beat Saber is in the game. Look, the soundtrack is mostly pretty great, but there's also only so much I can take of the same 27 songs before I snap. If I end up hearing at any point again in my life, it'll be because I was delusional from huffing paint. So I used a music importer tool to replace the entire soundtrack with my own. I exchanged Exhibit and Terror Squad for Run the Jewels and Tech 9, Spider-Bait and Unwritten Law with Closure in Moscow and AWOL Nation, Fluke and Sonic Animation with Metric and Justice. Hell, that iconic title screen we all know and love? I made it even better. Snoop Dogg ran so Mr. Scruff could fly. And I tell you what, ain't nothing better than careening down the streets of Bayview while MC RIOT of Death Grips lays down the lyrics of a generation. Beautiful, truly. Anyway, enough about me and my eclectic taste in tunes. A big part of what made Underground so much fun was the car customization system, which, of course, Underground 2 expands on in every single way. Not only are there way more parts this time around, with over 25 sets of bumpers and skirts, over 30 spoilers, way more colours and vinyls to work with, including pre-made vinyl sets, etc, etc, but even more of your car can be altered. Simple things like side mirrors and custom heads-up displays to spinners, carbon body kits, and even choosing which way the doors open. You could even slap some fat speakers in the boot, with multiple options depending on whether you want your fat beats coming out round or square. I prefer square beats, of course, as any audiophile would. My favourite thing is to belt on a good old-fashioned body kit. Ain't nothing like taking your skinny little Japanese import and making it thick as hell. Each car has 4 completely unique body kits to choose from, but annoyingly they're locked behind a particular event type called Outrun. See, whenever you're just driving about in the open world, sometimes you'll find other racers slamming into walls and cars and stuff, and if you hit up on the D-pad near them, a race starts, after they shit-talk you with lingo so outdated it wasn't cool even years before the game released.
Hey son, you all crunk and flex. Get out of here before I get savage on you.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
The goal is to get ahead of your opponent, then either try to outpace them or lose them in the windy city streets. You win when you manage to put 300 meters between you and your opponent. Never mind the fact that the game can get confused and think your opponent is out in front when you clearly are, or the fact that the AI can close the gap easily despite you pitting them into a wall, but certain parts are locked behind achieving a certain amount of wins in this mode. This wouldn't be too bad if all body kits were unlocked for all cars, but instead, you choose one body kit for the car you've won the outruns in. This means for every car you want a body kit for, at least outside of beating the career mode and unlocking them in free play, you need to do 11 of these races, and boy, howdy does that get tedious. Why would you even put so much effort into designing body kits for every single car in the game, barring SUVs, when you're gonna lock them behind an event type that gets you little money, has no effect on your progression, and requires you to win 11 times to even get it? I get that having to work to get the best looking parts in the game makes it more satisfying in the end, but not like this. This is such an incredibly tedious way to unlock body kits, and it also comes so late in the game that it's almost not worth doing. Which is a shame because they look so much better than the god-awful bumpers and skirts. Very few of these look good. This looks like my car is covered in nicotine patches. This looks like the equivalent to my car wearing a pair of skis. And this one looks like it's about to push its electricity shooting Supreme Overlord to their death, except not really because someone somewhere decided that they wanted more money. Never mind the one that has a fucking slash through it. I mean, yeah, some of the body kits are pretty tasteless as well, I'll admit, but I don't know. It feels weird to lock them behind outruns like that in my opinion.
Boy, you blowing it up. Keep it up and it's all gravy, man.
Now, there's a good reason why I haven't really talked about the gameplay despite being several thousand words into this review, and that's because I'm not sure how people are going to react to what I have to say about it. It's always best to put the positive stuff at the beginning so it's less likely that people will misconstrue your words because most of these people have the attention span of a Dead by Daylight player, so they drop off about halfway through, thank God. But anyway, in my opinion, and that's an important distinction, ladies and gentlemen, and smizmars, Need for Speed Underground 2 is simultaneously one of the best Need for Speeds and one of the most boring at the same time. You may think I'm being a little frivolous when I say that, but I'm dead serious. So, let me break it down. At its core, Underground 2 is a very simple racing game, but that simplicity is one of its strong suits. The way cars handle is extremely easy to grasp. They turn smoothly, respond appropriately to tap steering, and while it may not be the most nimble thing around, your car is just responsive enough to be able to weave through traffic like it's some sort of elegant street racing ballet. I won't go as far as calling it a simcade, it's very obviously not, but in a way it also plays like a very arcadey Gran Turismo. Correctly judging when to hit the brakes and maintaining an optimal racing line are very important to your success outside of the occasional bit of cheese. And combining the need to follow the best racing line possible while also accounting for traffic makes for a challenging and sometimes exhilarating experience. Put simply, I think the way cars handle here is absolutely perfect for this type of game, accessible for newcomers with just enough depth for long-time players to discover. Unlike the first game, Nitrous isn't a limited resource either. Where the skill points gained from near misses and power slides were previously used to unlock new vinyls and PD Pablo themed Mitsubishis, here they award you by replenishing your Nitrous tank. Everything from dodging traffic to getting hang time to even hitting the hydraulics gives you more juice in the caboose, fuel for your mule, gas for your ass. This simple change promotes more aggressive driving. For example, chaining near misses will give your multiplier up to ×5. So if you can keep the chain going without hitting traffic, you essentially have infinite nitrous, which is pretty sweet. All but one of the event types from Underground returns, so I won't waste time explaining how they work. Circuit and sprint modes are practically the same as before, while drag and drift are comparable with a small change or two. Drag events are kinda worse now, sorry, I'm telling it how it is. For one thing, changing lanes can be strangely unresponsive, and a lot of the time, getting total isn't the player's fault. And this is only when the drag strips are straight stretches of road. What fucking imbecile decided it would be a good idea to set a drag strip on a section of freeway with massive sweeping corners and a giant void of nothing in the middle that you can't drive on, so when you switch lanes from one side to the other, you overshoot the lane you switch to and crash into some prick in a delivery truck? When I choose to enter a drag event, I expect a drag strip, not a drag corner. Drift is functionally the same as last time as well, with the only key difference being that you now share the track with 3 other opponents. You can also drift down a few routes up in Jackson Heights in a potentially initial D-inspired downhill drift event type. You get bonus points for drifting within 132 light years of the presence of oncoming traffic, but on top of this, these events are hilariously broken because anything that isn't the main road is considered a bonus zone. This driveway next to a mansion is a giant bonus zone that gave me around 90,000 points alone, one of 2 zones on this track that I could do so, and to get first place I needed around 200,000 points. It's so unbelievably busted to the point where I wonder if playtesters even picked up on this and told devs to put a barrier there to block it off and make the event an actual challenge. Or maybe they cheekily kept it a secret because hot diggity damn is it gratifying seeing your score skyrocket like that. The old drift tracks from the first game have been repurposed into a new Street X mode, or is it Street Cross, and they're just trying to be hip and cool by turning cross into an X and then pronouncing it as an X instead of a cross. I don't know, I skipped a tutorial video. Fuck, whatever, anyway. Racing on these circuits is more fun than it sounds. What racing line you take is literally the most important tactic in these events, as nitrous is disabled, so you can't rely on a quick boost of speed if you make a fucky wucky. Although sometimes it feels a bit like you need to squeeze your way to the front of the pack within the first corner or two, or else whoever is in first place will take off like a class of students after their teacher doesn't show up for 15 minutes. I'll get to the last couple of event types in a sec because they tie into a major part of the game that I think needs discussion. So the game is split into 5 stages, and with the exception of the first stage, each one will have you signing with a sponsor, a real-life sponsor who seems unaware that they are sponsoring you, an illegal street racer partaking in illegal street racing. Anywho, not important apparently. As per your contract with Sparko or Toyo Tires or Nestle or whoever you sign up with, you'll be required to fulfill a few obligations in return for a massive payout. You'll need to win a set number of races of your choice, complete 3 races of the sponsor's choice, and get your car on DVD covers by raising the visual rating of your car, at which point you'll be able to snap the photo for the cover yourself, which is a neat touch. Funnily enough, I've seen and read that a lot of people end up finishing every race on the map only to hit a metaphorical wall and are unsure how to progress, despite the sponsor's contract and Rachel telling you exactly how to do so.
Just build a 10-star car, and you'll land the DVD cover and the cash.
All I'm getting from this is that y'all are really bad at following clearly laid out instructions, or all these forum posts were written by Aaron Hansen. On top of these obligations, you also need to enter the Underground Racing League, or URL for short. Unlike the rest of the game, URL events take place on closed circuit locations, an airfield, and a permanent track that bears similarities to Sepang International Circuit, wouldn't you know. These tracks are great. They're the perfect icebreaker after prolonged hours racing about in the city, offering distinct corner types and a little more of a focus on slicing through apexes as smoothly as possible compared to most of the routes in Bayview. The airfield has lengthy straights for you to empty entire tanks of nitrous, while the Bayview Speedway is filled with tight hairpins and chicanes. These are the only 2 locations that URL races take place on, and that's the inherent problem here. So much of the game is spent racing on slight variations of these 2 tracks, and it gets so boring. It is so incredibly fucking boring. Every few regular races you do, like, I don't know, maybe every 3 or 4 races, you'll get a notification to hit up a URL event. Like clockwork, every half an hour or so you'll find yourself driving through the same 2 locations, desperately hoping for something new, and occasionally you'll get a new variant of each circuit, but they're usually barely different enough to really count. Like, oh, wow, here's the same track again for the 9th time in a row, but it's got a fucking Fuji Speedway-ass chicane on the first corner where everyone just piles up. To reach the final race of the career mode, you need to finish 100 races out in the city, any circuit, sprint, drag, drift, or Street X race, but you also need to do 24 URL events. That's already a 4-to-1 ratio, but consider the fact that URLs are very often not just single races, but 2 to 3 race tournaments. There's at least 40, maybe 50 of these races at that point, and I'm not great at math, but around, a third of the game takes place in these 2 locations at that point? That's way too fucking much. They should have either toned down how many of these races you had to do, or add in another location or 2 to help remedy the monotony, such as some sort of docks area down in Cole Harbour or something. Underground 2 has a pretty lengthy career mode, but it's padded out way too much by repeating the same couple of URL races over and over and over and over again. And it's extremely disappointing compared to the routes you race out in the open world, which feel far more varied and enjoyable. It's a rather large blight on what is otherwise a really solid and enjoyable game. That's not to mention the ridiculously brain-dead artificial intelligence behind your opponents who regularly have sudden brain lapses and careen into the barricades or get into massive accidents at the very first corner like it's the start of an online race in Forza. And for the love of Skindred, if you know what's good for you, stay as far away from other races as possible. The second they collide with you, they interlock with you and directly steer into you with no regard for themselves, crashing into a wall and taking you with them. And you better hope you're not in front when going around a hairpin or something, because the AI is programmed to take the completely wrong racing line exactly 100% of the time, and they will ram into you no matter what. This is the ideal racing line around a 90-degree corner. This is what the small PP AI does. I'm small PP, and even I know this is fucked up. And this is all loosely bundled into a package of a game that never really ramps up in any way. You unlock more, slightly faster cars, you unlock new parts, you open up a few new areas to race in, but the game remains the exact same throughout, never deviating from its rigid progression model of signing up with a sponsor, driving to races and beating them until the sponsor is happy and the next area opens up so you can do it all again. A lot of racing games follow a similar formula, admittedly, even Need for Speed games that come after this one, because the nature of racing games often lead to repetitive gameplay loops. Literally, most of them are about repeatedly racing on asphalt loops for 5 to 10 minutes. But other racing games usually still feel like they escalate over the course of a playthrough. Gran Turismo 4 has you start out in a used Suzuki Cappuccino and end in futuristic prototype Le Mans machines, which makes you feel like you're moving up in the world despite racing on Grand Valley Speedway for the nth time. Or, if we're talking about Need for Speed games, the sequel to Underground 2, Most Wanted, uses a lot of the same ideas Underground 2 does, fulfilling a set quota of race wins and milestones for each stage, or in this case, blacklist member. But as you go up the blacklist, the cops that chase you down become more aggressive, employ smarter tactics, and are generally a lot harder to take out. The whole point of that game is to become the most wanted, and it feels like you're consistently inching toward that goal because the 5-0 keep bringing out tougher and tougher police units to take you down the further you progress. In Underground 2, it feels like I end up spinning my tires a lot. Despite getting faster cars, better parts, and the AI becoming more challenging, I don't feel like I'm progressing, and it's mostly in part due to continually having to repeat the same old URL events over and over again, or because the story is barely present until the end of the 4th stage, at which point barely anything happens anyway and there are no stakes in the narrative to grab your attention or to make it feel like the game is ramping up. But there's one other factor that plays a big part in this issue, and I think it's how slow this game can feel. This is a very subjective point, I think, but the name of the game is particularly fitting because it certainly left me with a need for speed. Obviously, driving a stock Corolla and a fully tuned Mustang is going to feel completely different in every way. I don't expect stock cars in the beginning to act like a supercar under the hood, but even a fully tuned car still feels weirdly slow for the most part. I could go well over 300 k's an hour down the freeway whizzing past traffic, but to me it doesn't really feel like I'm going 300 k's at all. I don't know, I can't be alone in thinking that Underground 2 feels slow, surely. It's not like because the roster of cars is made up of daily drivers like the Honda Civic and Subaru Impreza, Underground 1 felt genuinely exciting to play with a very similar lineup of cars. Am I crazy? Please, someone tell me they agree. I'm going fucking crazy here. Over the years, I've done a lot of flip-flopping with my opinion of Underground 2, like a fat, genetically male, furry Pauline Hanson. Even during my playthroughs for this review, I couldn't decide if I thought it was one of the best examples of an open-world racer done right, even compared to the small smorgasbord of open-world races we have today. But there were also times that I felt incredibly bored with what the game had to offer, with the inane repetition of URL events and an almost glacial pacing and sense of speed. I don't know if I could form an opinion on whether this is actually a good game or not, because my opinion of it is so muddled that any verdict I give could be rendered entirely moot down the line. Although, maybe it is. Maybe it is a good game, and I think it all boils down to one key reason. Even after playing it 2.5 times for the purposes of this review, after learning all the ins and outs of Bayview, racing on those closed circuits way more times than I would have liked, and spending hours in menus turning my cars into hideous eyesores, I miss it. I miss Bayview. I miss its well-crafted open world, its excellent lineup of cars, its memorable soundtrack, the sound of Rachel calling me and telling me that there's a photographer waiting to put my car on the next issue of I wasted way too much money on my fucking Mark IV Golf. There is this undeniable and unforgettable atmosphere to Need for Speed Underground 2 that I won't ever forget. And that's clearly the same for a lot of people because according to EA, the game shipped 8.4 million copies by the end of 2004. Keep in mind it launched in November the same year and ultimately sold over 11 million in its lifetime. And because of that, there are still so many people who look back on it fondly and even continue to play it to this very day. Need for Speed would only ever reach this universal and unanimous level of love once more in the future. And it was of course the very next game in the series. Need for Speed Most Wanted. 2004 and 2005 marked the beginning of a very crowded release period for Need for Speed games. The Game Boy Advance was ever popular, and the Nintendo DS and PlayStation Portable were butting heads in a frantic fight to become the best handheld of the era. Of course, EA being EA, each one of these handheld devices got their own portable version of Underground 2, with wildly varying degrees of success. Let's start off with the best one. The PSP's launch was blessed with a surprisingly good version of Underground 2, because let me tell ya, it was an absolute delight witnessing the antics of Bam Margera on the tiny little— The PSP was blessed with a surprisingly good version of Underground 2, but curiously it actually borrowed very little from its big console brother. The open world was missing, the car roster was smaller and notably more varied, and even the method of progression was entirely unique. Technically speaking, Underground Rivals isn't a port of Underground 2. The only thing they share between them are a few cars and the entirety of the soundtrack, which, God bless, they put My Chemical Romance in. I feel like a scene kid again. One of the biggest changes to the formula is the way the progression system works. Instead of stages or chapters or whatever else, you select an event type and try to work up your completion ranking in it, and that's it. Any event type can be selected at any point, from circuits to drifts to, oh okay, I guess it is street cross now? Fine, whatever. But you could effectively select drift mode and finish all the events there before you even touch anything else in the game. It's kinda like the game is a big checklist in a way, which sounds pretty boring when I put it like that, but because events aren't laid out in a semi-linear fashion and require you to beat them before moving on, you don't necessarily have to do event types you don't like doing, or at the very least you can put them off until later when you feel like doing them. I prefer Underground 2's method of progression overall, but as a PSP game, I think it lends itself well to the pick up and play aspect of a portable system. Gameplay-wise, while it does borrow aspects from Underground 2, it almost feels closer to the original Underground. The way cars handle, which is much more responsive and loose than Underground 2 in particular, the way nitrous doesn't replenish in any way during a race, to even the engine sounds, which if I'm not mistaken are directly ripped from Underground 1 as well. The only thing it doesn't seem to borrow is its sense of speed, which, I don't know, I think it's because of the field of view being so wide, but the starting cars feel tremendously slow and it takes a little while for that sense of speed to start kicking in. But it's okay, because they tried to make up for that drawback by shaking the ever-loving fuck out of the screen, like a parent who just found out their baby ate their car keys or something. I almost gave up at the beginning because it was fucking nauseating and almost removed all possibility of the game redeeming itself at that point. My eyes grew adjusted after a dozen or so races, but they shouldn't have to. Also, pro tip, never ever press the circle button. But like, for a handheld game, it's surprisingly fleshed out. Car customization is present and accounted for, and you have access to a good number of options from body kits and spoilers to even custom decals that were likely only ever used to write profanities or make obscure references. Making performance upgrades to your car is slightly more involved as you'll be buying individual parts within each category, something Underground 2 allows you to do but never incentivizes over simply purchasing an upgrade pack. There's also several discrepancies between Underground Rivals and Underground 2's car rosters. Here you'll find the usual suspects such as Lancers and Supras, but it was also the first modern NFS game to feature classic muscle cars, the Dodge Charger and Shelby GT500 in particular. The 05 Mustang was replaced with the SVT Cobra, and there was a surprise appearance from the Chevy Corvette as well. I have no idea how or why this came to be, but these cars would have been awesome to see in Underground 2 in my opinion. Shame they're stuck in the PSP spin-off, but at least it gives it something unique to bolster appeal to potential buyers. Almost every single mode from Underground 2 can be found here in some way, with the exception of sprints and URL events, oh thank god. Drifting in particular is a little different, as you need to maintain drifts through marked zones to score points and up your multiplier, rather than just noodling all over the road. This mode sucks ass though, because sometimes the game can't quite determine what counts as a drift, and if you haven't started drifting by the time you enter the marked zone, it counts as a fail and you lose your score multiplier. Sometimes I will be very clearly sideways, and the game gives me a look of disdain like I just called their mother a cow and says, "Fuck off, you cretin." There are two unique modes in Underground Rivals. On one hand, you've got the Rally Relay event type, where after you finish the first lap, you swap to another car, which is a decent enough mode, but not really worth mentioning or analysing. Unlike the new Nitrous Run mode, which I'm convinced that some stupid intern hopped up on sugar was responsible for. It's a riff on the tried but true checkpoint races seen in many other games before it, but each time you pass by a gate, your nitrous tank completely refills, and when you use it, you just go. You just go, dude, it's freaking insane. And most gates are so close together that you might not even fully expel your current tank of nitrous before you earn another refill. It results in all sorts of weird physics mishaps and practically encourages wall riding, and it's the stupidest fucking mode I've seen in a racing game in a long time, and I am all for it. Put Nitrous Run in Need for Speed Heat, you cowards! There's also some pretty good track variety here too, despite the fact that there's only 10 circuits, minus the street cross tracks. Although they do shove the same 2 or 3 tracks in your face way too damn much at the start. That feeling of repetition also doesn't ease up, as the game expects you to repeatedly enter the same events to get more cash and earn more medals to unlock unique parts and boss cars, which you don't have to do, but you kind of should anyway. Admittedly, I did tire of Underground Rivals after about 7 or 8 hours, and I think that's because I was sitting at my TV playing it for extended periods rather than playing it in short bursts, which I believe was intended. Either that or the smoke from all the surrounding bushfires started seeping in through the crack under my bedroom window and through my nostrils up into my brain, one or the other, maybe a combination of both. But that shouldn't be taken as my ultimate condemnation of Underground Rivals. That's just me having seen all I need to see and wanting to move on. I can see why the game is so fondly looked back on by PSP owners, and especially as a launch title, it really showed what the device was capable of, doing a respectable job at emulating a console racing game, even down to things like light trails and reflections on the road, which are very similar to some of the stylistic choices on the console version. At its absolute core, Underground Rivals is an enjoyable game that I think anyone who's a fan of arcade races has a capacity to appreciate, especially if they can play it on the PSP. Wish I could say the same for these two. In the last video, when I said, nowadays it's a relic of the past that has no reason to be brought back, people actually came to Underground GBA's defense. Maybe it was sarcastic, who knows, reading sarcasm on the internet is like finding a Queenslander in a library, it's practically impossible, but holy fuck, guys, it really wasn't a good game. This is the muddy and pixelated hill you choose to die on? The GBA version of Underground 2 doesn't warrant me talking about it a lot because it's extremely similar to its predecessor in all but a few ways. For one, it plays like a lesser version of Underground Rivals rather than Underground 2, copying its progression and performance upgrade systems almost wholesale. Driving feels a little less stiff than before, but still not particularly enjoyable. Drifting is just as awful, and don't even get me started on the drag races. Ah, look what you've done, now you've got me started on the drag races. These are functional enough, but once they start introducing traffic, it's a complete crapshoot. How the shit are you supposed to tell where traffic is and whether you're gonna hit any if this is what you have to look at? Genuinely. Rivals at least had an indicator to tell you if the lane you were currently in was actually safe or not, which it didn't even need. That should have been implemented here, no question. Also, what the hell is this track design where a public road has a massive gap in it? This isn't The Simpsons, you nimrods. Moving right along to the DS version. Surely we could expect something interesting to take advantage of Nintendo's new hardware, right? I mean, on the surface it looks fine. Released around half a year after both the DS's American launch and the original release of its console counterpart, Underground 2 looks surprisingly sharp on the DS, with clean, recognizable car models and fairly well detailed 3D environments. It's a real looker of a game, especially this early on in the handheld's lifespan. Again, it copies several ideas from Underground Rivals to the point where one wonders why all 3 portable versions don't share the same name, but the progression and upgrade systems are once more ripped from Rivals, and once more it's a checklist of events. Everything seems to check out so far, no pun intended, and it sounds like a recipe for a fun little DS game, but oh wait, they fucked up the most important thing. The driving. Holy shit, this game is no fun to actually play. The blame squarely lies on the controls and how difficult it is to actually turn. Sometimes pressing left or right will steer you slightly in that direction, other times you'll veer wildly towards the barricades at the edge of the track. I spent ages trying to figure out what was wrong. Was this an asphalt situation where double tapping a direction would initiate a drift, or in this case, make you turn more? I experimented with the idea and that didn't seem to be it. It just never works the way you want it to. I try to avoid obstacles, but I always find myself turning at half the rate I want to, and when I want to make tiny little adjustments to my trajectory, suddenly I'm in fucking Bangkok. It doesn't work, and I feel like I'm alone in saying this because I go and look at videos of kids playing the game and recording it with their mum's Motorola and pausing every few seconds to adjust the screen, and also 009 sound system Dreamscape is playing, and I do this to see if people agree with me so I know I'm not going crazy, but then the comments are just, I have beaten the PS2 version. Need a Booger handheld to get the NIDS. 2019? Nintendo 64 can't do this. Graphics aren't terrible, I mean it's not bad for a D's game, I'm shocked TBH. The first thing I did was mute my volume. 2019? Can you go free roam on DS? Wow, nice graphics! Another old days. So then I go on Metacritic and immediately regret that poor decision.
Best racing game on DS, even better than the PSP version.
Hey, no, stop, just calm down, don't do it.
I gave up after a few races, I'm sorry, I know I should be going as in-depth as I possibly can, but oh my god, this is genuinely one of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played. One of the worst racing games I've ever played.
Alright, here we go with the Patreon thing. Get ready for me to mispronounce all your names. And if you don't like it, I don't know, just message me on Patreon or Twitter or whatever. Anyway, a big thank you to Damien Maxted, Nation McGaltile, Matt Beaker, Ace00, Nico Randall, Dakota Lewis, Julian Brown, Nathaniel Forrest, Isaac Lamp, Waster USA, Duncan Austin, Pastor Boy, Gabba Scabba, Leo Alex 50, Heat Hoot Skyat, Global Truncation Error, Laurent LaCroix, Sheepy, Loomis Doomis, Chatter Estop, Gapnicon, Cooper James Price, Sebastian Orbe, Travis Miranda, Thomas Hart, Lazaro Dave, The Ruby Red Rose, Tyler Cross, Bite My Askey, and Chris Passamonte. Also, Ramil Knox. Or is it Armile Knox? I don't know, I'm a clod, I'm so sorry. Anyway, I don't know, I'm tired, I'm out, bye.